Morning مطر دحروق. Morning guys. Good morning all.
Good morning يا مستر.
Morning.
يا مستر.
يا مريوم عاملة ايه؟
تمام الحمد لله. حضرتك عامل ايه؟
انت الحمد لله. عمر بسنت.
الو مستر.
نجح. أوتا.
مستر حضرتك كنت فين يا مستر؟
I told you I had some circumstances and alhamdulillah. But it's not corona.
الله خير.
Some people thought it's corona. It's not corona. Allah, I'm okay as you can see. Gamal. Morning Gamal. Morning all.
السلام عليكم.
So we have Allah Yakrimak Habib. We have 12 participants so far. Nada. Shah Ibrahim. Okay. Let me just share the screen. Okay.
ازيك يا مستر؟
Morning, Daniel. How are you? So we have 13 students in the room right now. Excuse me.
Mister,
Yes.
I'll just get out of the meeting from my phone to enter from my laptop.
No problem.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The last time we did up to page, I think 105. As you can see, the screen is shared now. And this is page, I guess this is page 106. Yes, 106. So as you remember, we are doing that prologue of the Canterbury Tales. And in the prologue, as you remember, the writer, Chaucer, Geoffrey Chaucer, is giving us a full description of each person, outward and inward. He describes the character and describes what this character is wearing, how he or she is dressed, and so on. I uploaded or put on SMS, let's say like a chart in which the characters are summarized. I want to share it with you. Can you share? Here it is. Can you see the screen now? Can you see this chart?
Yes.
Yes.
The title is The Canterbury Tales Pilgrim Chart. It's a character chart. Let's welcome Hamid. Okay, as you can see, we have the pilgrim's name. For example, we have Chaucer himself, the narrator, and how was he traveling to the Canterbury Cathedral? Horse, okay. Major physical traits, his physical body characteristics and distinguishing features. He didn't describe himself, of course. Follies or silly things, vices, bad things, negative qualities of this character, and the positive traits or virtues and attributes. So we can, as a summary of the prologue, we can focus on this summary. We have each character, how most of them, of course, or almost all of them were traveling on horses, right? We know that they all were traveling on horses, but this is a horse, fine horses, horse, and so on. It's the same. Major physical traits, some of them are described in detail, and some of them we have no description, like Chaucer himself, the narrator, and the negative points and the positive points about each character. Okay, if you remember that we did some of the characters last time, and today we're going to do our start from page 106. We are going to do 6 pages today, inshallah. There was a Franklin. You know, Franklin is like Benjamin Franklin was one of the presidents of the United States, or maybe one of the founding fathers of the United States. There was a Franklin, but a Franklin at that time was a job. Does anyone know what does a Franklin do? Do you have an idea what a Franklin does? Franklin? Okay, a Franklin was simply a landowner, a rich person. If you go to the footnote at the bottom of the page, here, a Franklin is a wealthy land owner, a wealthy land owner, a rich person, okay? There was a Franklin with him. It appeared white as a daisy petal was his beard, which means his beard was white. Daisy, you know daisy, the flower, it has white petals. You know the petals of the flower. His beard was white. A sanguine man, and here on the left, we have sanguine. Sanguine means confident, cheerful, optimist. It's a positive trait of any character, okay? A sanguine man, he was cheerful, smiling, confident, optimist, and so on, or optimistic. High-colored and benign. He loved a morning sup of cake and wine. He loved to eat a morning piece of cake soaked in wine. He lived for pleasure. He believed that pleasure is the ultimate happiness. To be happy, you have to have pleasures, to be indulged in pleasures and enjoy everything in life. He lived for pleasure and had always done, for he was Epicurus' very son. You know, Epicurus, like to welcome Farah. Epicurus was a person, a Greek philosopher who believed that, let's read it from the footnote here, referring to a Greek philosopher who believed that happiness is the most important goal in life. And your goal in life is to make yourself happy the way you like. Everything is permitted, everything is allowed. The most important thing for any person, we are born to be happy. This was his principle in life. So this man was Epicure's son. He was like his son, and he believed in the same beliefs, in whose opinion sensual delight was the one true felicity and sight. Here in line 346, he says, for he was Epicurus' very son. And in lines 7 and 8, he explains it, in whose opinion sensual. This is Epicurus' opinion. We have a kiki. Okay. He believed that, he believed that in whose opinion sensual delight, happiness, was the one true felicity and sight, the one true happiness he can see. This is the only happiness in his opinion. So here we have a question on the left here. What question do lines 346 to 348 answer about the main idea in line 345? So line 345, he lived for pleasure and had always done. So this is the idea. And he explains it here. Why? Because he was Epicurus' very son. He was like his son. He believed in the same beliefs, in whose opinion sensual delight, sensual happiness was the only happiness he could see. Okay, as noted as Saint Julian was for bounty, he made his household free to all the country. So he was generous. In brief, his household was open for anyone. Again, as noted as Saint Julian was for bounty, he was rich, he was his house was full of food and full of money. His bread, his ale, his beer, or his drink were the finest of the fine. So everything in his household was fine, was of the best quality. And no one had a better stock of wine. The wine he had in his household was the best His house was never short of baked meat pies. All the time, whenever you go to his house, you find food, expensive food, the finest food ever, of fish and flesh, everything, all the types, fish and flesh. And these in such supplies, it positively snowed with meat and drink. And this is a metaphor. Whenever you go, it snowed meat and drink. Everything you would dream of, you find it at the Franklin's house. And all the dainties that a man could think, anything you could think of, anything you wish to eat or to drink, you find it there in the Franklin's house, the generous man, the most generous man. According to the seasons of the year, changes of dish were ordered to appear. And there were dishes for every season, which means the man was generous and rich again and again. He kept fat partridges in coops. He had like fat birds in coops, like chickens. Okay, a partridge is a type of bird, and these birds were fat. Okay, in coops. The coop is the house or the place or the cages of the chickens. Beyond many a bream and pike were in his pond. He had a pond in which he kept some types of fish like bream and pike. Bream and pike. So he had the birds, he had the fish, he had the flesh, he had everything. He had the wine, he had the ale. Okay. Many a bream and pike were in his pond. Woe to the cook. Of course, he had cooks who would cook this food for the guests. Woe to the cook whose sauces had no sting. If his cook, okay, cooked something badly, he would be punished. Woe to him. Woe to him. Okay. Or who was unprepared in anything? If any cook of his cooks were unprepared or was unprepared in anything, woe to him. As we say in Arabic, ya wailu, ya wailu. And in his hall, a table stood arrayed. The table was loaded with food all the time. And guys, can you hear me? Hello? Myrna, is my voice clear? Myrna?
Your voice is glitching.
Yes,
Is it clear?
you're talking right now.
I can't hear your voice, Myrna. I'm not sure whether it's my connection problem or yours. Let me ask Yaouta. Yaouta, can you hear me well? I can't hear
Mister, now I can hear you.
Sir, I can hear you well, but in the past it used to lag, as Myrna said.
Okay, so give me just a second. Okay, sorry. Right. Is my voice clear now, guys? Hamid, can you hear me? Mr. Hamid?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Hamid, are you there? Hamid? Hamid? Okay. Right. So the man was rich and generous, as we said. Woe to the cook whose sauces had no sting, or who was unprepared in anything. And in his hall, a table stood arrayed, loaded with food and ready all day long. All day long, this table was loaded with food, ready for the guests who would come to eat at the Franklin's house, with places laid. Okay, as justice at the sessions, none stood higher. He was in a high position or in a high rank, he often had been member of the shire. He was a member in the county. You know, shire is part of many English names of towns and cities. Yorkshire, West Hampshire, and so on. A dagger and a little purse of silk. He always carried a dagger. You know, a dagger is a small sword, a curved one most of the time, and a little purse of silk. He had a purse made of silk hung at his girdle, okay, white as morning milk. The silk purse was white as morning milk. It was as white as milk. As sheriff, he checked audit every entry. He was a model among landed gentry. He, again, the last line of the description of the Franklin, he was a model to follow among landed gentry. Landed gentry means landowners. If you have, for example, or if you had a piece of land, a large piece of land, you are a landowner. And it's called, the people who have land are called land gentry or landed gentry. So he was a model among them. He was a model among landed gentry. Let's move to the next character, but in fact, it's not one character, it's 5 characters described together at one time. These are called guildsmen. A haberdasher, you know what a haberdasher does? A person who sells small things. In Arabic, I think we call him al-khirdawati. Okay, a dyer, you know, dye means color something, a dyer. A carpenter, a weaver who weaves carpets, and a carpet maker. So we have 5 characters here described together at one time. They are called the guildsmen. Okay, again, a haberdasher, a dyer, a carpenter, a weaver, and a carpet maker were among our ranks, were among the pilgrims, all in the livery of one impressive guild fraternity. All of them belonged to guilds. What's a guild? Let's read the definition of guild fraternity. You know, fraternity means brotherhood. In the Middle Ages, associations or unions of men practicing the same craft of trade, like the syndicate. Now we call it the syndicate of doctors, the syndicate of teachers, or as we say in Arabic, نقابة المعلمين, نقابة الأطباء. This is the idea, guild. Okay, called guilds or syndicates. Set standards. These syndicates or guilds set standards for workmanship and protected their members by controlling competition. You know, nowadays, a niqaba or any syndicate or guild does the same stuff, sets standards to be followed by, if you were a doctor and you want to join the syndicate of doctors, you should have obtained a certificate, a specific certificate at least. And if you want to open a new clinic or a clinic, it should be such and such. It should have these and these characteristics, okay? And it organizes or controls the competition between them. Okay, so again, we have a haberdasher, a dyer, a carpenter, a weaver, and a carpet maker, and they all belong to guilds, okay, guilds or unions at that time. They were so trim and fresh, their gear would pass for new. They were dressed in new clothes. Their knives were not tricked out with brass, but wrought with pure silver. Their knives were made of silver, which vouches alike display on girdles, on their girdles or belts, and on pouches. On their a girdle is like a belt which surrounds your body, or and pouches, if they have pockets or something. Each seemed a worthy burgess, like a member of the parliament or something, fit to grace a guild hall with a seat upon the dais. Their wisdom would have justified a plan to make each one of them an alderman. And they were wise, the five of them, these guildsmen, were wise and they deserved to be members in the parliament, like an alderman or a high-ranked person. They had the capital and revenue. They were, let's say, we can say well off or rich. Besides their wives, here the narrator is describing their wives, declared it was their due, and if they did not think so, then they ought to be called madam. Their lives were showy a little bit, their wives, sorry. They all wanted to be called madam, is a glorious thought. And so is going to church and being seen. Their wives like to go to churches and being seen going to churches, having your mantle carried like a queen, because there was something or someone there at the church, maybe he would take your mantle or your coat carried like as if you were a queen. So their wives like to go to the church to uh, have their coats carried like queens. They had a cook. Forget about the 5 guildsmen. Let's move to the third a group of today's characters. We talked about the Franklin as one person, then we talked about the 5 guildsmen, and then we talk about their cook. They had a cook with them who stood alone for boiling chicken with a marrow bone, sharp flavoring powder, and spice for savor. He could distinguish London ale by flavor. He could distinguish. He was very skillful at distinguishing tastes and flavors, as he could roast and seethe and broil and fry. He can do everything. He was a skillful or a clever cook. Make good thick soup and bake a tasty pie. He could do all this. But what a pity. So it seemed to me that he should have an ulcer on his knee. This cook had an ulcer on his knee. Something, you know, an ulcer, something like a wound, or okay, on his knee. As for blancmange, he made it with the best. A blancmange is a French word, as you can see. Let's see the definition here. Blancmange, at the time, the name of a creamy chicken dish. So the ulcer on his knee looked like a blancmange, or it took the color, maybe it was white, like a blancmange. And he could roast, we said this, sorry, we reached here. He made it with the best. So this man was a skillful cook, but he had an ulcer on his knee. And then we have the skipper. The skipper. Skipper is a shipman or a sailor. Skipper, remember, a skipper, not a rope skipper. A skipper here means a sailman or a sailor. There was a skipper hailing from far west. He was hailing, saying hello. He came from Dartmouth. So I understood that he came from the town or the city of Dartmouth. He rode a farmer's horse. To go on pilgrimage, this skipper borrowed a farmer's horse as best he could in a woolen gown. He was dressed in a woolen gown that reached his knee. It was down to his knee. A dagger on a lanyard. He had a dagger falling free, hanging from his girdle, hung from his neck, under his arm and down. The summer heat had tanned his color brown. He was tanned by the sun because, you know, sailors work most of the time in the sun, on the ship or in the boat in the sun. And certainly he was an excellent fellow. He was a kind guy. Many a draught of vintage, red and yellow, he'd drawn at Bordeaux. Bordeaux is a French city, while the trader snored. The nicer, he used to travel maybe from England to France by ship, by sea, okay? While the trader snored, while the trader or the owner of the goods on the ship was sleeping, the nicer rules of consciousness he ignored. he didn't have any consciousness or conscience. Sorry, he didn't have any conscience. He was a traitor. He wasn't, or he was a con artist or a fraud. If when he fought, the enemy vessel sank, if he fights an enemy and the vessel or the ship of the enemy sank, he sent his prisoners home. They walked the plank. As for his skill in reckoning his tides, currents, and many another risk besides, moons, he knew everything about the moon, harbors, pilots. He had such dispatch that none from Hull to Carthage was his match. Yani, in other words, he was the best sailor ever, from Hull, an English town, to Carthage, a Tunisian town. In all this area, he was the best of them. He was the best sailor ever in this place. Hardy he was, prudent in undertaking. His beard in many a tempest, had its shaking, and he knew all the havens as they were, all the shelters, from Gotland to the Cape of Finisterre. So he knew every shelter, or all the shelters when you are at sea. He knew every shelter that was available from Gotland, from this town to this town, and all in the sea between these two places. And every creek in Brittany and Spain. He knew everything of the sea, about the sea. The barge he owned, the ship or the boat he owned, was called the Madeleine. So this is the skipper, or the the sailor. Then we move to the next character, a doctor. A doctor too emerged as we proceeded, and on their trip, the narrator described them one by one in the order of their description, maybe here, or appearance. A doctor too emerged as we proceeded on our journey or trip. No one alive could talk as well as he did. So the man was eloquent. The doctor was eloquent. No one alive could talk as well as he did. So he was the most eloquent person on earth at that time, on points of medicine and of surgery. He was the best one to talk, or he was a knowledgeable doctor. He knew everything about medicine and surgery at that time. For being grounded in astronomy, he watched his patients' favorable star. He was also an expert in astronomy. He knew many things about the stars and so on. And by his natural magic, knew what are the lucky hours and planetary degrees for making charms and magic effigies. So he was, again, an expert doctor. He was an expert in medicine and surgery and in astronomy at the same time. The cause of every malady you'd got, he knew. If you are ill, if you are ill, if you have a malady, okay, or an illness, he would tell you what the cause is, and whether dry, cold, moist, or hot. These were the four, as they believed at that time. Let's read this part: dry, cold, moist, and hot. Here we have an explanation of this. The cause hot. It was believed that the body was composed of four humors, or four components: cold and dry, this is the first component; hot and moist, the second one; hot and dry, the third one; cold and moist. And that diseases resulted from a disturbance of one of these humors. So if there was a disturbance of one of those four components, any person could get sick. Okay, again, the four humors are cold and dry, hot and moist, hot and dry, cold and moist. Okay, let's go up again. So here he knew, and whether dry, cold, moist, or hot, he knew their seat, their humor and condition. He was a perfect practicing physician. He was a perfect practicing doctor. These causes being known for what they were, he gave the man his medicine then and there. So because he was an expert doctor, he gave or prescribed the right medicine. All his apothecaries, you know, an apothecary is a person who in the past used to mix medicines. But now we say apothecary about people who sell I'm not sure what they sell, incense and so on, البخور والحاجات دي أو العطارين. In other words, an apothecary now we can say العطار. In the past, those people were like pharmacists or chemists or druggists. Okay, they used to mix medicines and sell them. All his apothecaries in a tribe were ready with the drugs he would prescribe. He had or he was dealing with specific apothecaries, okay, and they had the medicines he prescribed ready, and each made money from the other's guy. Yani the doctor was making money from the apothecaries, and you know they were working in cahoots. You know, when you work in cahoots with someone, you earn money illegally or in a false way. You know, doctors and some pharmacists do this nowadays. A specific doctor prescribe this medicine, okay, because this company, if you sell or if you goes to the doctor, a representative from the medicine company goes to the doctor and say, if you prescribe our medicine, we will give you 10,000 per year or 10,000 per month, or we will send you on a long trip to the for example to Hurghada or and so on. The doctor prescribed the medicine. This is how the medicine company benefits, and the doctor gets some money or some reward for this. Okay, so this was what the doctor and the apothecaries doing. They were doing this again, and each made money from the other's guile. They had been friendly for a goodish while. He was well versed in Asclepius too, and what Hippocrates and Rufus knew. You know, Hippocrates is the father of medicine. And if you are a newly graduate doctor, if you are a newly graduate doctor, you swear on Hippocrates' oath. And Dioscorides, this is a person for sure. Now, Dedangan, Galen, Andrazes, Hali, Serapion, Averroes, or in Arabic, Ibn Rushd. And this is, I think, Razes is Abu Bakr al-Razi. Avicenna, Ibn Sina, the Arab scientists. Razi, Ibn Rushd, Avicenna, Averroes is Ibn Rushd. Avicenna is Ibn Sina. Constantine, Scotch, Bernard, these are famous people or famous doctors who came before him. John of Gaddesden, Gilbertine, I'm not sure. In his own diet, he observed some measure. There were no superfluities for pleasure, only digestives, nutritives, and such. He did not read the Bible. He wasn't a very religious man. The doctor wasn't a very religious man. He did not read the Bible very much. In blood red garments, let's talk about his outward appearance. He was dressed in a red garment, as we saw on the first day. We studied the Canterbury Tales, slashed with bluish gray and lined with taffeta. Taffeta is color. He rode his way, yet he was rather close as to expenses, and kept the gold he won in pestilences. So the man was, let's say, stingy. He was a penny pincher. He wasn't very generous. Gold stimulates the heart. Gold makes his heart happy, or so we're told. He therefore had a special love of gold. He was interested in collecting money and gold, and he wasn't interested in spending this money. Okay, type. I want to stop here. I want to wrap up what we did today. We studied, I think, 4 types of characters. Can you remind me, guys, of them? Hello, friends.
Franklin
The Franklin person is the, and we said that the Franklin was a landowner, a rich person whose household was open for guests all the time. His household was full of food of every type and drink, fish, meat, flesh, birds, let's say wine, ale, everything you could think of, right? This is the Franklin. In brief, the Franklin was rich and generous, right?
Yes.
Okay, so and the second person or the second
A group of 5 people. The guild members.
yes, good. They were, let's remember their jobs. Let's go to the page here. A haberdasher. And we said a haberdasher is a person like قلنا بتاع الخردوات او اللي بيبيع زراير وإبر والحاجات دي. This is a haberdasher. Okay, a dyer from dye or color. Dye is what? I'm not sure. A dyer. And nowadays we have some family names in Porsaid called the Sabbagh. عيلة الصباغ. It's a famous family name, I think, in Porsaid and in Egypt. A dyer is Sabbagh, somebody who dyes something or بيصبغ something. Okay, a carpenter, a weaver, you know, a weaver, and a carpet maker. Who can describe them, guys, in brief?
They were extremely wise.
Yes. Go on.
And it said they should have been parliament members.
Yes. What about their wives? Their wives were showy.
Were showy, yes, and they loved to go to church because
for them like queens.
yes.
Okay, let's move. These 5 people had a cook who accompanied them all the time. They had a cook here with them who stood alone. He was skillful cook and he had an ulcer on his knee, right?
Yes.
Yeah, the man was describing the people again, outwardly and inwardly, their appearance and their characters, right? And then we have the skipper or the shipman or the sailor, and we said he borrowed a horse from a farmer. Okay, he rode a farmer's horse as best he could in a woolen gown that reached his knee, a dagger, and so on. And the man knew everything about the moon, the sky, and he was the best salesman, or not salesman, sailor, sorry, of his time, right? He knew everything about the sea at that time. Then we have the doctor. Let's move to the doctor. And the doctor was dressed in red, as you know, and he knew everything about medicine, surgery, and astronomy. He knew everything about the moons, the skies, the stuff, and he knew or studied the 4 components of the human body very well, and he knew dry, cold, moist, and or hot, and we said these are the 4 components, or as they say, they use the word humors here, and if there was any, let's say, fault with these components, a person gets ill or sick, and he earned money. He dealt with some apothecaries, and they were, let's say, mutually benefited from one another, or they worked in cahoots. Remember this expression. I want to show you this expression here in the dictionary. Cahoots. When you work with someone in cahoots, you I'd like just to share the screen with you. You share here. Yes, here. Can you see the screen? Can you see the dictionary? Guys?
Yes.
Okay. Cahoots. Cahoots, in cahoots with, acting together with others for an elite